Welcome. This is a session devoted to a question to ask or not to ask questions in dementia care. And so we will be asking these questions and hopefully answering some of them. And I'm here with Laura Harvey, a friend of mine who is also a fellow certified nonviolent communication trainer, certified with Center for Nonviolent Communication, which we are an organization we are both part of. And Laura has had extensive experience of teaching NVC, as we call it, nonviolent communication, all across the world, including UK and places such as Nepal and in India, Sri Lanka, Kenya, Brazil, all these places you've been to, sharing, as well as being a facilitator and author and a teacher. So I'm very happy that you are here with me to share this experience of asking questions together.
Thank you, Patty. And maybe I should say how I met you, which
Mm.
was when you joined the UK MVC community and you were beginning to research the book that you've written about dementia and what you found MVC and your own experience could bring to that. So it was a joy for me to accompany you through some of that and learn about your experience firsthand as a carer and the difference MVC made. And I know now that you're also counselling, aren't you? You've set up your own counselling practice.
So that's the way nowadays that I am kind of supporting families affected by dementia, as well as people struggling with mental health. And specifically today, I wanted to talk about how questions can have their place in dementia care. So thank you for mentioning my experience firsthand as a carer, because that's actually where this whole question arose in the first place. So as I was trained to be a live-in carer, I was specifically told not to confront my clients with questions. And I also picked up from my fellow carers who were sometimes even instructed by the family members of the people they were looking after that it's best not to ask them any questions. So for us as carers, that sometimes brings some challenge around that. So maybe it is worth understanding where this question actually, or this issue arose in the first place, or how it was being why was it that people kind of advised against asking questions? So you can well imagine, and that surely happens, that when you ask quite casual, in normal situations, quite casual questions such as, oh, don't you remember when we did this? Or don't you remember so-and-so? Or where did you put my book? Or what did the doctor say? Or these kind of quite innocent questions, when directed at someone who lives with dementia, they can actually feel quite scary, or even bring about a sense of embarrassment about not remembering, sometimes even cause an argument or contribute to the sense of depression, I suppose. So there are very good reasons for which we need to be wary around questions, or mindful about what kind of questions we ask. And what I found out, and very much through working with other carers, has been that if we rule out all questions altogether, it's really hard to have an authentic and genuine relationship with someone. So I kind of asked myself, what are the questions that are, as it were, safe to ask when we are sharing life with someone who has dementia. And this is where nonviolent communication came as a great help, because we discovered that actually there are questions we can ask, and they are not only not troubling us in the relationship with someone, they actually enrich our relationship in some way. So I came up with these 4 or 5 categories of questions that we all could could play with in our relationship with someone. So firstly, these are the questions about what matters. There are also questions about the now, about the experience right here and now. The questions about feelings, the questions about oneself, questions to oneself, and the questions about the same old stories. So I would like to unfold a little bit now, say a little bit more about these questions. So Laura, would you like to say to us how you understand questions about what matters?
Yeah, I think it's a lovely way of describing what's really at the heart of MVC, because in communicating with someone non-violently, we're trying to respectfully reach out to find out what matters to them in any one moment. And it doesn't matter whether that person is somebody who is well or ill, we have the same needs. So one way of thinking about this, what matters question, is through the lens of what in MVC we call universal human needs. And I think you've got a slide about those, Patty. Here we are, some of them. So they tend to be things that we all recognize. They're usually single words, they're usually abstract nouns, but they talk about things that are qualities, life-giving qualities, and which, if they're absent for any reason, our life is not as rich.
Yes, thank you. And you mentioned something about, as we can see on this slide, that our values or needs, which are commonly shared, they are often expressed, as you said, by concepts that perhaps aren't so easy and straightforward to process when we have some kind of cognitive impairment. So there are ways of asking questions about these needs or these values that aren't necessarily so abstract. So would you like to share something about that?
Yeah, so really we're bringing our curiosity about what's alive for the person, and we don't necessarily need to use a need word, an abstract quality, or needs literacy in order to do that. So internally, I might be looking at a friend or a relation or someone I'm caring for who is different to how they were before, and I'm picking up from their behavior, perhaps from their facial expression, perhaps from the way energy is moving through their body or trapped in their body, that they want to express something. And I might think, I wonder if they're longing for some more freedom, or the freedom they used to have. And so I could phrase that as a question by asking something like, would you really like to decide by yourself what we do or what works for you? And there I'm guessing around a need for freedom or autonomy, but I'm not actually using those words if I think that they would be a barrier. And similarly, if I'm thinking that inclusion or belonging might be important, I could ask, would you like to be part of what's happening? Or if the way other people are interacting is a barrier to that, I could maybe check, would you enjoy it, or would it help you if people spoke more slowly? And they can let us know whether our guess is something that's helpful, or if it's another need. And similarly, touch is such a core need for all of us. It's a way of showing care, which is another need. So if I'm thinking they might like some affection, I could check that out rather than giving them something without checking. I could check, would you like a hug, or would you like someone to hold your hand? And again, that there's that respectful awareness of their own autonomy and choice. Choice is another need, so they're everywhere.
Such a big need for someone who lives with dementia. Very often needs around autonomy and choice. I agree. And we can also even provide a way, like a very simple way of actually meeting that need to such an extent. Like, for example, allowing someone to choose what they're going to be eating or how they are going to be eating,
Exactly.
things like that. We can also kind of keep these questions around simple experience of the now. So we can bring questions, such as, are you enjoying sitting in the sun right here and right now? You don't need to have any extensive knowledge about anything, certainly about nothing in the past, or no memories involved. It's about experiencing, how are you experiencing what you're experiencing now? And that might include also not so easy experiences. Perhaps someone appears worried or not quite themselves. Um, there is a question we can ask around that. You seem worried. Are you troubled about something?
Mm.
So that brings us to questions around feelings that are also questions that can be included in the way we care for someone.
Thank you. Yeah, and there is a link between needs and feelings, and this for me is one of the sort of light bulbs that's contained within MVC. We're often, as we're socialized in the UK and many other countries, a little bit more familiar with feeling words, and we use them more in our conversation. And it was really helpful for me to recognize that those feelings relate to whether a need is met or unmet. So, going back to our previous conversation, if somebody is not having their need for inclusion or belonging met, they may feel lonely. And I could ask that question. And it's a kind of acknowledgement of what's going on for them. And time again, we find in our own experience as trainers and as people, living life in the different spheres we move through, that really acknowledging and appreciating what's going on for someone in the now is one of the best routes to connection.
That's
So
right.
yeah.
And even when it involves difficult feelings such as anger, when someone is obviously looking like really agitated, we can ask about, what's behind that? Are you angry because you are longing for some understanding? So,
Mm.
as you were saying, these actually feelings and needs are really closely related. And I wanted to talk about other kind of needs, other kind of questions actually, and needs behind them. Is so far we've been talking about questions that we can ask to someone we are looking after. But what about the questions about ourselves? What about the questions that I, as a carer, can ask myself about myself? And these are equally valuable, absolutely essential questions in building healthy dementia relationship, which is to include my own needs into the mix. So a contented person with dementia doesn't necessarily mean or equals a happy carer. To make a healthy and satisfying relationship with someone with dementia, we need to include our own needs as well. And there are as well questions we can ask about the past. So I left it to the very end of our presentation today, because these are the questions about something what we tend to stay away from, which is the past, right? So when you recall what we were saying about the tricky questions that might be asked to someone with dementia, it's usually the questions that involve memory. So that seems like a tricky area to go into, which is asking questions about the past. However, and I don't know whether you, the listener, you would agree with me, but in my experience and other people I worked with, it seems that even in very advanced stages of dementia, people seem to have like their own core story, a story that we only know only too well because we've heard it over and over and over again. But it seems to be the story that someone feels absolutely confident about, like they know what's what in that story. It's their story. And I found out that actually, instead of labeling and dismissing it as a boring repetition, we can inquire into that story. So what was it like? Was it fun? Or did you find it really, really hard? So these are the questions we can bring into the same old story, making it rather new.
Yeah, I love
So,
that, the newness there, Patty. It's just it's reminding me that of something that our audience will all be well aware of, that is the present for the person telling the story, whether it feels secure because they've told it many times, or whether they believe they're telling it for the first time. So what we're really doing by engaging in questions about the story is being alongside them, accompanying them in the present. We're not
that's right.
really in the past at all.
That's right. It seems to be something that we're all learning, that actually what really matters in connection is being present with someone. And that's why I find questions being so important in care, because they can be expression of care itself. So we basically communicate, well, I am curious how this experience is for you. I am interested in how are you finding this day. I am like, I really want to find out how are you feeling. I really want to know what matters to you. So that's the way we can communicate care that is both ways, that it's not something like a care that we give to someone. It can be actually something that we share between us. So in those words, we would like to conclude presentation. I'm sure I'm speaking for both of us. We really hope that you might find it, or have found it, like bringing a little bit more life into conversations.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you, Laura.